Hello everybody, it's Briggs here, and like always, welcome back to All Day Anime, and today we will be talking about which of these villains have the best backstory. Last week I did a bracket on the best backstories, only including protagonists. I'll link that down below, so feel free to check it out after this one if you haven't already. However, for today's epic bracket royale, the first round will be themed. All of these villains have great backstories, but in the end, there can only be one. In round 1, we have the nice guys, Itachi from Naruto versus Griffith from Berserk. Round 2 goes to the ancient evils, Yami Bakura from Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus the homunculus in the flask from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Next we have the demon round, Dio Brando from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure versus Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho. And in the final round, we have the famous families, Doflamingo from One Piece versus Shigaraki from My Hero Academia. However, before we begin, today's video is sponsored by Amino. Amino is an amazing free app filled with communities for pretty much every interest on the planet, my favorite being the anime Amino. But what I'm here to tell you guys about is their cool new story feature. Yes, Amino now has stories, and I plan on posting stories on their app. My username on the app is BriggsADA, and a link to the app is down below. Speaking of backstories, here are some Pokemon backstories. I just posted a story on my global profile. Here's a sneak peek. Who was the first Pokemon? Was it Mew, the ancestor of all Pokemon? And by extension, all Pokemon are genetically related to Mew? Was it Bulbasaur, the first Pokemon to ever be recorded via the Pokedex? Was it Rhydon, the very first Pokemon to be created by the developers? Or was it Arceus, the god of Pokemon that hatched from nothing and created the universe? To watch the rest of this story and many more in the future, follow me, BriggsADA, on the app, link down below. I'm so excited about this new feature, and to finally have an outlet to make short-form content for you guys. Not only would you be downloading an amazing free app that I use, but you would be supporting me and my channel as well in the process, and I really do appreciate it. Let's jump back into the video. So, Itachi versus Griffith. Calm down, control your boners everybody. Itachi was the older brother of Sasuke, and for the vast majority of the series we get Itachi's story from Sasuke's perspective. Meaning that we mostly just knew that Itachi murdered everyone in the Uchiha clan excluding Sasuke, leaving him alive purely for the reason of being able to test himself and steal his eyes in the future. However, what we are interested in today is what came before all that. At the ripe old age of 4, Itachi witnessed the Third Great Ninja War. So many of his friends and family were killed, and that made him become a pacifist, working the rest of his life to become as strong as possible in order to bring peace to the world, an ongoing theme within Naruto. And soon after this he would be approached by Shusui, who offered to train him, becoming best friends in the process. When the Nine-Tails attacked the Leaf, the leaders of Konoha accused the Uchiha for the attack and relocated the clan to the edge of the village where they could be watched more carefully. By the age of 6, Itachi had enrolled in the Ninja Academy and was a fucking nerd. Scoring the highest scores in every category and being praised as a prodigy. He ended up graduating 4 months into his schooling, and this is when he was approached by Danzo for the first time. By 10 he was a Chunin, and by 11 he was an Anbu. At 13 being made an Anbu captain. All the while he isolated himself from everyone around him, and while most think that he kept to himself because he was on another level, it was actually because he didn't align with them ideologically. All coming to a peak as his family planned a coup based on their unfair treatment. Itachi and Shusui wanted to calm the Uchiha and preserve peace, but Shusui's right eye, which held Kotomatsu Kami, was stolen by Danzo. As such, they had no real options left. Shusui left his remaining eye to Itachi and jumped into a river. Because nothing shows your dedication to a cause quite like leaving all the hard work to someone else. Regardless, his best friend's death upset Itachi enough for him to awaken his Mangekyo Sharingan. And what made this even better for Itachi is that most of his clan believed he was responsible for his best friend's death. The village elders came to the conclusion that the Uchiha were becoming too dangerous, and to save the village they asked Itachi to eliminate them. Hey, that's pretty fucked up. He ended up agreeing to do it as long as they allowed him to spare his younger brother. Now, murdering your whole family is honestly a bit of a hassle, or at least that's what I've heard. Luckily, a masked man claiming to be Madara Uchiha offered to help. So they murdered the Uchiha, and we get these amazing scenes like this one. In order to keep the peace in the village, he shouldered the blame for the massacre to hide the elder's role in the attack. Of course, it doesn't end there, as even after he exiled himself from the village, he would go on to work for the Akatsuki as an informant. Say what you want about Itachi, but the twist that he wasn't just a heartless monster, but instead one of the most selfless characters in anime was amazing. He sacrificed his life and his family for the sake of his little brother and the village. This is why Itachi will forever be one of my favorite characters, and it's honestly one of my favorite parts within all of Naruto. On the topic of characters who do some terrible things for all the right reasons, we have Griffith, who of course did nothing wrong. Griffith was born in poverty to the point where he often couldn't even afford a slice of bread. However, believe it or not, he wasn't all that happy living in the slums, and as he looked up on the castle in the city where he lived, he dreamed of having his own kingdom one day. A dream that was supported by a gypsy fortune teller who told him that he could conquer the world. This fortune teller was actually such a sweetheart that she gave Griffith the Crimson Beret, which is probably just like a good luck charm or something. Who could possibly know? He kinda takes this idea and runs with it, forming the Band of the Hawks, with members such as Corcus, Pippin, and a few others, eventually coming across the 12-year-old Casca, who is having her first of many terribly aggressive experiences from people who want to sleep with her. This guy is nobility though, so that's a nice twist. Griffith shows up and slices the would-be rapist's ear off, then passes Casca his sword and says to use it if she has something to protect. She kills the dude and joins Griffith, admiring him as her hero. Just a friendly reminder to never meet your heroes, by the way. They might be all bright now, but you never know when there just might be an eclipse. In a pretty rare way for this series, something good happens when Lord Genin hires the Band of the Hawks and gives them a big break. In a much more berserk fashion, Griffith realizes he can sell his body to the Lord for a bunch of money and a better future for his group. Years later, the Band of the Hawks would come across Guts. He and Griffith fight, and Guts gets absolutely wrecked. Guts challenges him to a rematch, saying if he loses he will join the Hawks, and if he wins, he will be able to cut Griffith the same way he had been cut the day before. Griffith agrees and quickly overwhelms Guts once again, claiming him as a member of the band. Now, between gathering powerful mercenaries and taking financial shortcuts through the Bone Zone, the Band of the Hawks had become fairly respected and well known, eventually taking part in a war against Tudor, in which Guts finally notices the Beret. To be rewarded for their great work, Griffith and Guts meet the king and his brother, as well as Princess Charlotte. She's pretty clumsy though, and trips down the stairs, and when Griffith catches her, he is slapped for touching the princess. Naturally, this leads to Griffith and the princess going at it every chance they get, and while the show might not show it, I mean come on, it's Griffith. The king is not too pleased with this, and sends assassins after Griffith, leading him to leave the city. Now I'm going to skip forward a little bit to save some time, because it turns out Berserk is long as hell. But suffice it to say that he goes into a bunch of more battles, and when Guts finds Griffith to be veering off the path to his dream, he decides to challenge him to a duel for his freedom. This time Griffith loses, and he becomes insanely torn up about it. Now, we've all been there. You get into a fight with your best bro with benefits, and you call up your ex. It happens, so Griffith finds his way into Charlotte's room, and they quickly make up for lost time. He ends up leaving in the morning, typical guy, am I right ladies? And he ends up being arrested by the guards and being ordered into the torture chambers of the Tower of Rebirth for a full year. He's whipped, beaten, starved, probably tickled, and definitely brought to the point where he wishes for his death. The king goes to visit and rub his victory in Griffith's face, and Griffith, the absolute mad lad that he is, tells the king he must just be jealous because he wanted to sleep with his daughter. So that goes about as well as you'd think for him. Over the next year, he is basically forced into self-reflection and remembers his dream of becoming a great king. Eventually, Guts and Casca break him out of prison. He's very much a shell of his former self. He forces himself on Casca because, hey, it's been a few chapters since that has happened, and well, you all know the rest. A certain big moment that changed the series forever happens, and if you don't know, you should probably go watch Berserk. Now to decide who goes on ahead. First off, here are the results of my Twitter poll. You should definitely follow me at alldayAnime with 2 E's, because some guy with 1 follower has the after that I wanted. But anyway, follow me to vote for yourself in the future. So I'm gonna be honest, this is probably the hardest choice I've ever had to make in a bracket video. I paired these two characters together because they each give up everything for their dreams, acting as villains and seeing themselves as heroes, each betraying those closest to them along the way, and for me at least, I think I like Itachi a little bit more. It might be because I spent more time following his story, or because I just remember how insane his plot twist hit me, but in a completely different way. Itachi, someone who slaughtered his entire clan, became an amazing person in my eyes, while Griffith became the polar opposite. I felt betrayed just like Guts did. Now, I definitely like Berserk better than Naruto as a series, but based on backstories and individual characters, I like Itachi slightly more. Again, I'm not saying Griffith is a worse character, but to me, a positive twist always connects me to a character a little bit more than a negative one. And for that, Itachi moves forward to the next round, and in the next round we have Bakura versus the homunculus in the flask. Both are ancient beings who are kind of just being assholes in the modern day, but we should probably start with Bakura. So we first meet him and find him to be the third Millennium Item user, the first being Yugi and the second being Pegasus. But luckily this guy's super chill and nothing like Pegasus, so the gang obviously has nothing to worry about. All the way up until episode 12, where we find out that his Millennium Ring is housing a spirit, just as Yugi's puzzle is. Although this one is definitely a little bit more aggressive. In the manga, he even kills Pegasus by ripping out his eye. Anyways, let's start off at the beginning, about 5,000 years ago, or 3,000 if you're watching the Japanese dub, but hey, what's a 2,000 year gap between languages? Easy mistake to make. Anyways, during the creation of the Millennium Ring, a shard of the evil god Zork Necrophades was sealed inside of it. When the bandit king Bakura ended up stealing the ring, Zork was like, yo, this guy's kinda hot, I want in on that. And their souls began to fuse while the bandit wore the ring. Zork and the bandit Bakura were some of the greatest threats to Atem in his time, and remained to be all the way until the modern day. Millennia later, when Bakura put on the ring, the spirit of Zork and the bandit king would awaken with amnesia, only remembering fragments of his past, but still dead set on finding and wielding all the Millennium items. Now I absolutely love finding out more about the spirit of the ring because it complements the ruthless way Bakura acted in the show so well. He was always willing to kill, or banish people to the Shadow Realm. He would lie, cheat, and steal his way to anything he wanted. And in the last season of the original series, you'd see him convince Yugi to gather all of the items for him before sending them both back in time in an attempt to resurrect Zork with the items and become more powerful than the gods. There isn't a ton to Bakura, but I always liked how his character melded with his backstory so flawlessly. It didn't seem like a last minute addition, but instead like a great villain who had been built up since almost the very first episode of a 224 episode saga. A threat that was always looming in plain sight and waiting for his chance. And we can move on to the dwarf in the flask from FMA Brotherhood, also known as Father. Now Father might not be as old as Bakura, only clocking in and around a spry young age of 430, but what he lacks in age, he makes up for in strength and badassery. He is the oldest homunculus, created when the essence of the Eye of God is mixed with Hohenheim's blood. This happened when the King of Xerxes was basically using his slaves as test subjects to understand the truth beyond the gate. Father was born in a flask with all of the knowledge of the gate, however he was unable to perform alchemy, and the flask was all that kept him alive. Despite this, he wanted to live in freedom, and as such made friends with the slave he was born from, eventually teaching Hohenheim enough to win his freedom through education. Still locked in his flask, Father grew jealous of humanity for their ability to live with, love, and support one another while he was trapped alone. This all culminated in him being pushed over the edge and wishing to be someone even greater than a god. After all, he knew everything the world had to offer and deserved to be praised for it. Sometime later, the King of Xerxes would call on Father to ask for the secret of immortality. Naturally, Father told him. All he would have to do was create a countrywide transmutation circle, then commit atrocities and massacres at specific spots along the circle. Father led Hohenheim to the center of the circle, and once it was activated, everyone in Xerxes was sacrificed, leaving only Father and Hohenheim alive, now with immortal living philosopher stones for bodies. Now Hohenheim wasn't exactly in the loop for all of this, so when literally everyone he had ever met, talked to, loved, walked by, or saw from a distance was killed in a flash of light, he was understandably upset and abandoned Father. Centuries later, Father would rip the sins of humanity from himself, leaving only a cold and powerful, godlike man who is still trying to overtake God. I love these two together because they have so many parallels, each a byproduct of an ancient ritual, doing all they can to attain and surpass the power of God, and each being destroyed when they are faced with that power. However, when it comes down to it, Father is just a much more concise and well-written story. Plus, it's a lot easier to take him seriously when he is literally eating God, compared to when Bakura is activating a trap card. And for this poll on Twitter, you guys also seem to agree. On to round 3, Dio versus Toguro. When it comes to Dio, I think Phantom Blood is more or less his backstory, while Stardust Crusaders is his modern story. So for now, let's focus on Dio's life before he attained his stand. Dio Brando was born to an alcoholic father in the late 1800s. He was abused, beaten, and raised in a very rundown and dangerous part of London. The only good thing he had going for him was his mother, but when she died, he was left alone with his monster of a father, Dario. Dio had enough of his father's abuse and began poisoning him slowly. and luckily when he finally died, Dio was adopted by an extremely wealthy George Joestar who believed he owed Dario his life. As you might expect from someone who came into a loving and wealthy family this way, Dio was very excited, and showed this by almost immediately kicking the family dog. This was mostly in an effort to make George's only son Jonathan upset. Dio had laid out a plan to inherit all of George's fortune. However, to do that, he needed Jonathan out of the way. He would go bully Jonathan, kissing his girlfriend, beating him up, and spreading rumors about him. And when Jonathan finally stood up for himself, he showed Dio he wouldn't take anymore. Dio locked his dog in a wooden crate and threw him in an incinerator. After the two made a false truce and acted friendly until they graduated. All the while, George Joestar was slowly becoming sick. Turns out Dio was still kind of an asshole, and was poisoning George in the same way he had his father. Jonathan finds out about his plan and confronts Dio, leading him to kill George and use his blood to activate the stone mask, turning himself into an immortal and all-powerful vampire bent on world domination. And then Jonathan learned Ripple and was able to defeat Dio by cutting off his head. However, Dio survived. On Jonathan's honeymoon, Dio and a few of his vampire servants invaded the cruise ship and killed almost everyone on board, stealing Jonathan's body in the process. That being said, the ship was sinking, and the only way to survive was to lock himself in a casket and be trapped under the ocean for hundreds of years, before being found by fishermen and trying again to take over Zawardo, this time with a massive power boost. And his rival today is Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho. These two honestly fit together amazingly well. Dio was all about becoming a demon and yearning to be immortal, while Toguro, after becoming a demon, yearned only to die. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Toguro's story starts 50 years before Yusuke's, when a demon named Kairen attacks his dojo and slaughters all of his younger members, leaving only himself, his older brother, and his lover, Genkai. And let me just add in here, younger Genkai can get it. Good work, Toguro. Anyway, as almost everyone he cares about was murdered, Toguro was forced into joining the upcoming Dark Tournament. For those of you who don't know, it's just your run-of-the-mill shonen tournament, where when someone wins, they get a wish. Anyway, Toguro vanishes for the first 3 months leading up to the tournament, and when he returns, he, his older brother, and Genkai team up and are able to win the tournament, killing Kairen in the process. However, Toguro was mentally broken and exhausted by this point, hoping to never go through such a loss and heartache again. He wishes to become a powerful demon. After all, that 100% seems like the way to go about things. Ask Kaneki, it always works out. So Genkai ends up telling him that demons are kind of a turnoff and stuff, and she leaves him. However, he is pretty much too far gone for that to really matter too much to him anyways. He builds up on this mentality of power being the only thing that matters, constantly pushing himself to become stronger so that he can never be hurt again. And at the same time, he's hoping for someone strong enough to show up and kill him and put him out of his misery. Throughout his 50-year wait, he works constantly as more or less a mercenary, offering his strength to whoever is willing to pay him the most. While he prefers not to hurt others, he is more than willing to kick someone's head off if need be. And then fast forward to his present story, Toguro eventually comes across a young boy named Yusuke and sees in him the potential he has been looking for. All of this culminating in their fight where Toguro does everything that he can to pull the full potential out of Yusuke, be it pretending to kill his friends or actually killing the audience. Either way, he came into this fight with the mindset that if Yusuke wasn't strong enough to defeat him, then no one was, and opening the Demon Gate would be his last chance at finding a worthy adversary to end his life. Now both of these characters are pretty similar at base level, but one of them is built up with confidence while the other lives their life doubting the decisions that they have made. Don't get me wrong, I love Dio, but Toguro's story is just so much more well-rounded in my opinion. While he feels like a demon at times, there are also moments when his humanity is overwhelmingly obvious. It's a tightrope act where he could have easily leaned to being just another big, bad, buff, bad guy. Did I say bad twice? But he managed to cross the entire story and become someone truly memorable. And for that, he is moving on to the next round. And for the poll, you guys actually voted for Dio, but as Lord D. Brigo, I cast my vote on Toguro, although Dio is an absolute mad lad and I love him. Finally, we have One Piece's Doflamingo versus My Hero Academia's Shigaraki. Let's start off with Dofi. Now, believe it or not, before Doflamingo was a warlord, he was among the poorest of the peasants. But before that, he was a celestial dragon. When he was only 8 years old, his father decided to quit being a world noble, a questionable choice to say the least. But whatever, together with his brother, mother, and father, Doflamingo was lowered to a normal life, while still holding a bit of wealth. While his father was a genuinely nice guy, the people in his new hometown were hesitant to welcome a celestial dragon with open arms. And by hesitant, I mean they burned down their mansion, forced them to hide away, live in a junk pile, and eat out of trash cans. Regretting his choice, which again, Who would have saw that coming? Doflamingo's father called the world nobles for help, with Dofi listening to the call and hopeful for their assistance, only to be rejected. Soon after, his mother would die from an illness, most likely a result of the horrible living conditions. It didn't exactly get better from here. The angry citizens finally found their shack and attacked the surviving family. They were lynched and beaten to near death. However, Dofi survived. At his breaking point, here is where Doflamingo vowed to kill everyone. Within the next few years, he would meet Virgo, Treble, Pika, and Diamante. And when they saw his conqueror's haki, they believed him to be sent by the heavens and gave him the string fruit, making him their impromptu leader. By the age of 10, he had had enough, deciding to kill his father in an attempt to regain his title as a world noble. He took his father's head to marry Joa. However, they turned him away because he was from a family of traitors. He returned to his family of friends, and they all swore to do whatever it took to make him the next pirate king, killing anyone in his way. Eventually, he met up with his brother Rocinante, who would become one of his closest companions, gaining the title of Corazon. Corazon would fall under suspicion of the rest of Dofi's crew after Corazon stole the Opi Opi no Mi and gave it to Law. Doflamingo would confront him and kill his brother, just as he had his father. All of this leading to him joining the warlords to ensure that the Marines would let him live freely. Meanwhile, he would go on to conquer the island of Dressrosa by controlling the king and forcing him to massacre his people. So yeah, Dofi is fun. He's fresh. But now we come to Tomura Shigaraki. And I gotta hand it to this guy. He just has something special about him. I just can't put my finger on it. He is so hard to nail down, you know? You might be thinking, Briggs, are you really just going to make hand puns the whole time? And that's a big thumbs up from me on that. Shigaraki's story starts with All For One. He was the sworn enemy of All Might, and when he was defeated, he took it in his own hands to find the grandson of All Might's mentor and corrupt him. And as you might have guessed, that points us right to Tomura. Now, fate definitely dealt All For One a winning hand here, as fuck. Now, fate definitely dealt All For One a winning hand here, and luckily for him, Tomura was given one of the most devastating and traumatic quirks in all of My Hero Academia. Tomura, whose real name was Tenko Shimura, had the quirk Decay. This was the ability for everything and anything he touches with all 5 fingers of his hand to dissolve and turn to ash. Pretty wholesome. Anyways, while we don't have the exact specifics on it, as most quirks do, this became active when he was a young child. Most likely his mom came in for a hug or something, and when he reached around her, she turned to dust. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Am I right, fellas? Either way, this led to the death of his entire family, leaving him alone to live on the street. No one who passed by ever offered to help him, and why would they? After all, a hero would come to save him soon enough, but a hero never came. Instead, a villain did. All For One adopted him, blaming society for him being left alone for so long. He acted as a guiding hand of hatred, handing all the hatred he had in the world to this child. All For One gave Tomura a place to live, and the doctor Daruma Ujiko gave him the disembodied hands of his family members. Soon after, he gave up the name Tenko Shimura and started calling himself Tomura Shigaraki. I feel like every time I make one of these, the last quarter is always so depressing. Anyway, between Tomura and Dofi, I gotta say I do like Dofi better. After all, he is one of my favorite villains in all of One Piece, and largely because of his backstory. The only thing that really hits super hard with Tomura is the idea of him discovering his quirk. That being said, his parents coming to hug him isn't exactly canon, as he can't exactly remember the event very well, but I'm sure it happened. So I gotta stick with Doflamingo here, and I'm sure anyone who's watched One Piece would agree with me. There is more of an extensive story there, and more levels to the story as well. And based on the poll that you guys voted for via Twitter, Doflamingo won as well. Alright, you guys know the drill. First round is extensive because I gotta get their stories out, and the second round is faster because you guys already know what's up. So our remaining rounds are Itachi versus the Flask, and Toguro versus Doflamingo. So when it comes to Itachi and Father, we have 2 guys doing their best. However, Itachi's story is leagues deeper, and by far more fleshed out. We get an entire life story for him, and every decision he makes sense to anyone watching after the truth is revealed. And a big part of that is because he kept his humanity through all of this, whereas Father literally threw away every relatable emotion anyone could have. And to me, relatability, especially in villains, is a huge part of what makes someone memorable and iconic. So in this round, Itachi will be taking the W. In a similar vein, we have Toguro and Doflamingo. And while Toguro is a fantastic villain, Doflamingo is basically the first character I jump to when I think of villain backstories. We had this sadistic, crazy, fashionable, and terrifying giant of a man wearing a flamingo feather scarf that seemingly can't stop smiling or laughing because his psyche snapped decades ago. And yet, once we get his backstory, we actually feel bad for him. We can sympathize and understand that he had everything taken away from him. He watched his father try to be a nice person, and he was lynched and tortured for it. So why would he ever be kind? It's this amazing twist in a character that will be allowing him to move on. Finally, I wanted to cover 2 honorable mentions who didn't make the list. The first is, of course, Lord Twigo himself, whose backstory is so great, it wouldn't have made this competition fair if he competed, as I'm sure you all already know. And the second is the original Brawly. When he was a baby, he had to listen to Goku cry, and that made him mad. Truly a tale that will give Shakespeare a run for his money. Back to the finals though, Itachi versus Doflamingo. Both of these guys are iconic villains in anime, and both of them are famous for their backstories. But when it comes down to it, even if Doflamingo can make us understand his path, it would never have us as emotionally moved in the same ways that Itachi's would. I'm sure you guys all remember Itachi's final moments in his fight with Sasuke, and how heartbreaking that was. That was directly a result of how amazing the character was put together and how his backstory complemented every detail of the story so far. He is the only character who could have won this bracket.
And whatever you do from here on out, know this. No matter what, I will love you always.
However, that is the end of today's video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Smash that like button if you did enjoy. Now for a quick shout out to my patrons and members. My goal is to use Patreon to continue to hire editors, that way I can maintain this level of quality. A huge thank you to Axel for editing this video for me. I think he did a fantastic job. Thank you so much, man. And a huge thank you to my patrons that helped me to hire Axel. Thank you Ace17FFDP, Beck, Chastity White, McManga, Nick Sands, Nothing But a Fan, Shoot Alpha, The Anime Dude, Thought Destroyer, and my highest current patron, Viva the Loser. By the way, thank you Viva for recommending me the World God Only Knows. It was actually unreal, and I can't wait to read the manga. And a huge thank you to my first member, who is actually the man, the myth, the legend himself, Too Spooky. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and just being an awesome friend, man. Me and him actually have a collaboration in the works, so you guys could expect that sometime soon. But on that note, I do hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys all next time, dudes. Shin Paku. El Sai Kangaroo.